stories. The US has said it is lifting tariffs on China up to 245% as a result of its retaliatory actions. The Trump administration officials had earlier said the ball is in China's court over making a deal with the US amid ongoing tariff tensions. Meanwhile, China has said it insists on shaking hands rather than shaking fists amid the ongoing tensions. Meanwhile, Japanese officials are in Washington today to discuss a trade deal, while the US Treasury Secretary has invited South Korea for talks next week. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Malaysia on the second leg of his Southeast Asia tour. The leader has presented China as a source of stability and certainty while making a case for free trade. Israel's defense minister says that no humanitarian aid will enter Gaza as blockages and military action continues amid negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to intensify military operations against Hamas until all war objectives are achieved. The US says there is an incentive for Russia to end the war with Ukraine as ceasefire action stalls. The Kremlin has accused Ukraine of attacks on energy despite a 30-day moratorium as Ukraine targets Russia with drones. Meanwhile, negotiations on a US-Ukraine mineral deal are progressing quite fast, according to a US official who has spoken with AFP. There are reports, however, that the US has lowered Ukraine's aid estimates. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the country's uranium enrichment as part of the nuclear program is non-negotiable after the US called for a halt. Tensions over a US-Iran nuclear deal continue ahead of further talks in Oman on Saturday. Reports suggest members of the World Health Organization have reached a historic agreement preparing for future pandemics. AFP, citing the WHO, say the legally binding pact will shore up global defences against new pathogens. We start with our top story this hour, and US President Donald Trump's administration has unleashed its most aggressive trade move yet, imposing up to 245% tariffs on Chinese imports in retaliation for Beijing's export bans on key high-tech materials. The White House said the move underscores Trump's America First trade policy and aims to secure critical US industries like aerospace, semiconductors and defense. China had earlier suspended exports of gallium, germanium, antimony and 6 rare earth metals, components vital to global supply chains. In response, Washington dramatically escalated its trade offensive, triggering fears of further economic disruption. China retaliated with 125% tariffs on US goods and warned it is not afraid to fight a trade war, calling for dialogue based on mutual benefits instead of US blackmail. Let's listen in to Lin Jian, Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
中方的立场一直很明确，关税战、贸易战没有赢家，中方不愿打，但也不怕打。如果美方真的想通过对话谈判解决问题，就应该停止极限施压那一套，停止威胁讹诈，在平等、尊重、互惠的基础上同中方对话。
Well, that 125% tariff came in after the US initially upped tariffs to 145%, that now moving higher. Trump, meanwhile, declared promise made, promises kept, touting record tariff revenue even as confusion erupted over new electronic duties. A brief pause by Customs and Border Protection on tariffs for consumer electronics was quickly undercut by Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Trump himself, who insisted the reprieve was only temporary. Adding a geopolitical twist, the Wall Street Journal reported Trump's administration is pressuring trade partners to cut off China, seeking pledges to block Chinese companies and rerouted goods in exchange for lifting US tariffs. While the full list of products facing the new 245% levy is still under wraps, analysts warn that both industrial and consumer sectors could feel the shockwave as the world's two largest economies dig in for a potential prolonged and bitter trade war. Well, looking at the markets, in Asia Pacific has traded mostly lower today following a decline on Wall Street overnight. Investors are closely assessing quarterly earnings while ongoing concerns about tariffs continue to weigh heavily on market sentiment. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index dropped 1.91%, followed by mainland China's CSI 300, which gained 0.31%. Japan's Nikkei 225 fell around 1%, while South Korea's Kospi decreased 1.21%, while the small cap Kosdaq lost 1.8%. Australian markets have also plummeted alongside India's stock market benchmark indices, Sensex and Nifty 50, opening lower following the weak global trade cues. Asia's markets have taken a hit amidst the Nvidia stock rally. Investors are concerned that this could mark the beginning of a tech battle between the US and China. Well, joining us in the newsroom is my colleague, anchor and correspondent Thomas Porteous to dive deeper into these markets. Thomas, of course, the reaction that we're expecting to see from this latest US announcement might be felt in the coming hours, but what can you show us about the data and what it's been showing this morning?
Well, Josh, yes, of course. We will now dive deeper into the global stock markets. We'll start off with Asia, whose markets are close to closing. Let's start with the Hang Seng Index, which is Hong Kong's financial index. You can see today it has lost nearly 2%, minus 0.91% there, up from minus 409.29 points. This is today's graph. You can see it's been fluctuating quite substantially there, but opened, has dropped lower for the day. Now let's look at the 5-day statistics. We can see some confidence gaining here, and then within the last 24 hours, we have seen this dip over here. We will now move on to the Shanghai index. This is today's financial markets. It is up a 0.26% today, plus 8.34 points. Not much confidence gained in the Chinese index there. We can now move on to the 5-day mark. Once again, looking at the mark, fluctuated quite a lot. This is from the past week on the Chinese stock exchange. We can see that it is very minimally creeping up despite Donald Trump's imposition of these tariffs. We will now move on once again. We now move to TAIEX, which is Taiwan's stock index. So Taipei has been losing confidence. We see a loss of nearly 2%, minus 1.96% there for the last day of trading, with markets just closing within the next few hours. We will now move on to the 5-day here. Here we can see the large drop that came 5 days previously, which has now been gaining a little bit of confidence and evening out there. We will now move to Japan's index. Japan's Nikkei 225 index here, dropping another 1%, a loss in confidence once again in Japan's index. We'll now move to the 5-day once again. A drop in 347 points. You can see here a make back of gains in the last 4 days, but once again it's been dropping off today. We'll now move to India's stock market, the Nifty 50. We can see a gain of around 0.45. India's stock has actually been doing very well in the past. After this crash, once Donald Trump's tariffs were announced, Asian markets fell throughout the whole Indo-Pacific. Nifty has actually done quite well in regards to, in contrast to the other Asian markets. We can see some gain here of 0.45%. Now let's move over from the Indo-Pacific into Europe, where markets are just opening. We now see London's FTSE 100, which we can see some fluctuation here. They have opened up, but just slightly, but we have seen a decrease of 0.38%. These European stock markets are just starting to open. Let's move on to the 5-day mark for the FTSE. Let's move on to the 5-day mark. We can see here Donald Trump's announcement. We can see the losses that were made in Canary Wharf in London on the London Stock Exchange. And then we can now see that these markets are just going to open up, and we will bring you the updates as they come. We now move on to Europe's stock exchange, European Union, pausing their retaliatory tariffs for the United States. Let's see how they are feasing in confidence. As you can see today, 0.72% down today already for the European stock market. This down 3.68 points. Let's move on to the 5-day mark there. You can see this big loss that's reoccurring throughout Europe and throughout Asia. This big loss directly after Donald Trump's tariff flip-flap, his changing his mind, but yes, we'll move on. DAX-P, German's index, Frankfurt. You can see this is very similar to Europe. Once again, opened lower. We can see 0.47% down already today, and we will continue to bring you more news updates from the stock market as the European markets progress.
Absolutely. Thomas Porteous there providing us more of an insight on the live data as it is coming in. We move on but stay on the trade topic, and Nvidia revealed a $5.5 billion charge due to new export curbs on its H20 AI chips. Donald Trump's administration banned the chip designer from selling crucial artificial intelligence chips in China, sending shares in one of the US's most valuable companies plunging in after-hours trading. The Trump administration had informed the company of the new licensing requirements for exports to China on April the 9th. Nvidia announced that its H20 AI chip, specifically designed for the Chinese market to comply with export controls, will now require a special license for the indefinite future. The company has driven huge advancements in AI technology, with shares up over 1,400% since 2020, making it one of the few trillion-dollar US companies. However, the news sent Nvidia's shares down 6% in after-hours trading, potentially wiping billions off its market value. These contradictions have escalated the US-China trade war, now spilling over into a tech battle. While staying in China, and their economy grew 5.4% in the first quarter of 2025, beating expectations and matching last quarter's pace. Strong consumption and industrial output helped keep the economy on track, but concerns are rising that this momentum won't last. Economists warn that growth could slow in the coming months as US tariffs, now as high as 245% on some goods, begin to bite. The tariffs imposed by President Trump's administration are aimed at pressuring Beijing over trade practices and access to rare materials. China has hit back, of course, as mentioned, with its own 125% tariffs on American imports. Here is what Sheng Liuyun, Deputy Commissioner of the National Bureau of Statistics, has had to say on the matter.
一季度国内生产总值31.87万亿人民币，按不变价格计算，同比增长5.4%，比上年四季度环比增长1.2%。
Exports, which have been a rare bright spot amid China's ongoing property crisis and weak domestic demand, are now under threat. Analysts say the trade war combined with internal challenges could weigh heavily on the world's second largest economy. Beijing says it will roll out more support for consumers and businesses. Premier Li Qiang acknowledged that exporters face profound challenges, signalling more policy action may be ahead. Despite the stronger than expected data, investor sentiment remains cautious. China's yuan slipped slightly and stock markets stayed flat as worries over the broader economic outlook overshadowed the Q1 beat. Well, staying on trade, and South Korea and Vietnam have vowed closer ties in response to new US tariffs. 46% potential on Vietnam and 25% potential on South Korea, now under a 90-day moratorium. Aiming to boost trade to $150 billion by 2030, both countries are pushing for a more balanced partnership. Samsung, which makes up over 60% of its phones in Vietnam, could be heavily impacted. Ministers from both sides met this week to coordinate strategies. Vietnam is inviting more South Korean investment, especially in tech, infrastructure and renewable energy. China has appointed Li Chenggang as its new representative for international trade negotiations and Vice Minister of Commerce, replacing Wang Shuwen. The move comes as Beijing pushes back against US President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, which have shaken global markets. Li previously served as China's ambassador to the World Trade Organization and as deputy permanent representative to the UN in Geneva. Wang was involved in the 2020 US-China trade deal, though tensions remain high, with US tariffs on Chinese goods now reaching 245%, while China is, of course, imposing a 125% tariff on American products. Now to China's leader, and President Xi Jinping met with Malaysia's king today in a state visit analysts said was aimed at polishing Beijing's credentials as a reliable partner and not a hegemon. Xi was welcomed by Malaysia's King Sultan Ibrahim in a colourful ceremony on Wednesday at the Golden Domed Istana Palace. The Chinese leader walked on a red carpet as he inspected an honour guard on the sprawling palace grounds as a Malaysia royal band played. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, after talks with the King, Xi is due to meet with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who will host him for dinner at the administrative capital of Putrajaya outside Kuala Lumpur. Both leaders will witness the signing of a range of bilateral agreements, according to the Malaysian Foreign Ministry. Moving now to Europe, and in the latest update, a senior official confirmed that Kyiv and Washington are rapidly advancing in their prolonged and tense negotiations over a deal that would give the United States preferential access to Ukrainian natural resources. Ukraine's parliament has voted to extend martial law until August the 6th. A senior lawmaker confirmed the decision, saying 357 deputies backed the measure, with just one voting against it. The extension allows Ukraine to continue mobilizing troops and puts a hold on elections as Russia's full-scale invasion grinds on. A rehab center for Russian veterans wounded in Ukraine has reached capacity. Around 30 individuals are currently receiving physical and psychological treatment at the state-funded facility. In southern Ukraine, Russian attacks on the city of Kherson have left one person dead and 3 others wounded. The United States has revised its estimated cost of aid to Ukraine, cutting the figure from $300 billion to around $100 billion, according to Bloomberg News. The report also notes that President Donald Trump is pushing for a bilateral minerals deal as part of his broader peace proposal. A Russian drone strike on the Black Sea port city of Odessa overnight has left 3 people injured. Fires broke out and civilian homes and infrastructure were damaged, according to local officials in the southern Ukrainian region. Meanwhile, Polish authorities are sounding the alarm over a surge in cyber attacks ahead of the May 18th elections. As a key ally of Ukraine, Poland has warned that Russia may be trying to disrupt the vote through hacking and disinformation. Digital Affairs Minister Krzysztof Gałkowski said nearly 2,000 incidents were recorded in a single day, and that monthly totals now range from 60,000 to 70,000 attacks. He declared Poland to be in a cyber war with Russia. Well, joining us once again is my colleague Thomas Porteous, anchor and correspondent with NewsX World. Thomas, I want to ask you first about this mineral deal that we know has been rolling on for weeks and weeks now. What more can you tell us?
Well, Well, Joshua, obviously this minerals deal stems from the Biden administration giving Ukraine $182 billion worth in aid to help their military effort against the Russian people, against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, this is not something that the Trump administration has agreed with. They have sought this minerals deal in order to get some sort of some financial things back from the Ukrainian people. Ukraine is a hub of these crucial minerals that can be used in technology, that can be used in defense, and these mineral negotiations actually came to a halt. As you may be able to remember, Zelensky and Trump were set to announce this minerals deal on the day that Trump and Zelensky fought very publicly in front of press cameras in the Oval Office. And so these negotiations have now continued from then since then, and now Donald Trump wants to get this deal finalized in the US interests and the Ukrainian interests, is how he puts it. They were seen to kind of come to a halt after this public confrontation between Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president. But since then, things have been slowly moving forward, and as we've heard, that this spokesperson from the United States has said that these negotiations are moving forward, and we could possibly expect a deal to be signed maybe quite soon.
Yes, Thomas, we are unfortunately running shorter on time, so we won't be able to discuss these Polish alleged cyber attacks, but I do want to discuss these strikes that have taken place between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, Odessa hit. Also, we know that Ukrainian drones have been reported by Russian authorities. What more can you tell us about the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, Odessa, the region obviously where NATO chief Mark Rutte visited yesterday, where the port city of Ukraine, port city in Ukraine, Odessa, NATO has been a backdrop of this war. One of the reasons why this war started in the first place was because Ukraine wanted to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Russia obviously does not want that to happen. And so Russia responded today with striking the port city of Odessa in Ukraine. We've obviously seen as well that Ukraine have launched a drone attack towards these Russian barracks. This has happened in the past 24 hours, where this devastating strike in the city of Sumy, one of the most devastating strikes of this year in terms of this conflict, where Ukraine responded with launching these drones towards where these ballistic missiles came from. We will obviously continue to bring you all the major updates in regards to the Ukraine and Russia conflict. These are the only updates for now, Joshua. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas Porteous. Of course, we will bring you those updates and anything else in the wider region as we get them. Moving on now, and Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense has reported detecting 17 PLA aircraft sorties, 8 naval vessels and 1 official Chinese ship near the island. 11 aircraft crossed the Taiwan Strait median line, entering Taiwan's northern and southwestern Adees. In response, Taiwan deployed aircraft, ships and coastal missile systems to monitor the situation. The incident aligns with rising Chinese military activity around Taiwan, heightening regional tensions. It comes amid Taiwan's 14-day Han-Kuang military drills, which began on April the 5th and simulated Chinese invasion scenarios, including grey zone tactics like maritime militia and drone incursions. The live fire phase is scheduled for July the 9th to 18th. Taiwan officials stress the need to prepare for non-traditional threats. Legislator Wang Ting-yu warned the first strike may not be missiles, but covert operations. We are bringing you now some breaking news from Europe. A UK Supreme Court ruled that the legal definition of woman under the Equalities Act 2010 refers to biological sex and not gender identity. The unanimous decision by 5 judges marks a major victory for gender-critical campaigners and could significantly impact ongoing debates and policies surrounding transgender rights in the United Kingdom. Well, some more breaking news now when Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi tells reporters following a cabinet meeting in Tehran that Iran's enrichment of uranium as part of its nuclear program is non-negotiable after US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called for a halt.
آنچه که مسلمه غنیسازی ایران یک امر واقعی پذیرفته شده و حقیقی هست و ما برای اعتماد سازی نسبت به نگرانی‌های احتمالی آمادگی داریم ولی اصل موضوع غنیسازی قابل مذاکره.
With that is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.